As Uganda plans to achieve NDP3 Vision 2040, EAC Vision 2050, and Africa's Agenda 2063, government planning, do we have our priorities right? Welcome to the Inter-University debate for this week, which is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. I'm your moderator. My name is Lake Gender Fancy. I'm an advocate and a tax consultant. With me, I have a panel of 3 gentlemen from different universities. Welcome to the talk show.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have familiar faces to the talk show. We have new faces to the talk show. So we are hoping for a very, very fruitful discussion. And I trust this panel. So let me introduce the panelists. I'll start with the gentleman seated right next to me, and that is Mr. Niringye Sam, who is a student at Makerere University Business School. Sam, you're welcome to the Inter-University debate.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay, welcome from winning the open space debate.
As usual.
Okay, our second panelist seated in the middle, that is Mr. Adungo Oniogo David, who is a student at Kyambogo University. You're welcome to the Inter-University debate.
Thank you very much, Gender.
Okay, which name do you prefer, David, Adungo?
Adungo or Oniogo.
Oh, okay. You know, I'm used to calling you Adungo.
I like that.
Okay, the third panelist is Mr. Kibira Derick, who is a student at Mountains of the Moon University. Derek, you're welcome to the talk show.
I'm humbled to be on the talk show for my first time, and it may be the last. I'm bound to leave campus around May.
Okay.
So it's such a great opportunity to make it here before I leave campus.
Okay, thank you so much, Derek, for being with us as you prepare to leave campus, and we wish you all the best after campus.
Asante.
Okay, so we are discussing government planning. Do we have our priorities right? And as I started the discussion, we are looking at it from every single angle. As we know, right now, the government has been trying to plan around NDP3 Vision 2040. Then EAC also has Vision 2050. And then, as you know, we are among the 7 members of the EAC. And then Africa's Agenda 2063. So I'll start my first question with you, Sam. Yes, so Sam, what is our current status in terms of all these areas that I have mentioned as a country?
Currently, Uganda, just like any other developing country, we're prioritizing security and we're predominantly agriculture. So you expect most of the countries in Africa, which are just developing, have actually prioritized security. And I don't think it's a priority, right? Wrong, because we think such countries are prone to insecurity, and therefore you have to first tighten the belt. Agriculture, of course, just any other economy that is about to take off, you actually have to prioritize agriculture. Although the agriculture we are prioritizing is actually employing most of the people, but it is contributing less to GDP, which I think is one of the reasons why we actually have a conflicting reality where if we're in middle income status or if we're not there, and the statistics that are corrected actually point contrary, whereas we feel we are there. But I think personally we are not there yet, but we're actually almost there. And I think the priorities that we have actually been advancing are really not bad. But then we definitely have hindrances. And in this debate, we shall hear more of the blame games and of the things that we have done right. We actually can't discredit the whole system. We definitely have some of the priorities right. And I think we are about to be a middle income status country. Thank you.
We are about to be. At some point, they said we had reached. At some point, you were at the door. And some says we are about to be. Okay, I will definitely get back to you later, Sam, especially on the issue of agriculture, as you mentioned. I know that it is one of the priority areas in NDP3, but my question later on will be to what extent is it now translated into the national budget?
Yeah, I will be glad to answer that.
Okay, let me move to our second panelist and bring him into the discussion, and that is Adungo. So Adungo Sam highlighted the current status in terms of priority for Uganda. My question to you is, let's go back historically. How are we faring in terms of development, looking at where we are coming from?
First of all, I have an urge to talk about what Sam has said. But
Yes, please
anyway,
do, please
well,
do. I also had the urge when he brought it up. Yeah.
we'll engage as we move ahead. But one thing we have to realize with Uganda is that Uganda has a very beautiful history. Just like any other African state that was colonized, it was for so long under the British rule. And the reason as to why this history is important, because it paved the way for the Uganda that we have right now. Even when after they left, the Ugandans had, or the people then in power, had a very big opportunity to change every other system and put it the right way, or in a way they would want to see it. They still opted for what the British left. Why and how they did that, maybe it's a debate for another day. But when we look at the progress of Uganda in terms of economic development, we have to understand it was very much hindered by political ideologies, because for so long, I think Uganda has had a number of presidents, more than any other state that I would know, that is like Uganda right now. It simply means that every time we wanted to develop economically, people were prioritizing political wars or political ideologies at that end. But when we started stabilizing, that is when YK Museveni, His Excellency, entered into power. We saw a drastic improvement in our GDP. As we move ahead, I'll show you why GDP does not necessarily translate to us being economically better as individuals of a particular state. But we started seeing a shift and our GDP started increasing. But the challenge came in after 5 years, when there was a shift in power. You realize that every time there is an election in Uganda, our GDP is going to fall for the next 2 years. Then it will continue rising. And that has been the trend in Uganda. Then if we move back, you'd realize that Uganda itself has a very funny structure or a very funny trend of economic development, which any other state has actually gone through. States such as the USA, states such as the Middle East, states such as Europe themselves started from an agro-based state. That is agriculture or fishing, etc., etc. Like Uganda, which is agriculture in nature. The second thing they did was an industrial revolution. And that is what kicked them off from being subsistent to actually paving the way to being a middle income status, and then after a developed status or a developed economy. What happened in Uganda is that from agriculture, they went straight to social services or service delivery. It is very funny that in Uganda, you have the ability to have buildings that can even exist in places like Japan, in few areas. But then why are people not using them? I mean, it seems like we are doing well with the structures, but we just don't have the agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution happening. I think with that history, it makes it very difficult even for us to reach Vision 2040 if we don't set our priorities right. If, as long as we are still prioritizing security, as long as we are still prioritizing agriculture, and we are not looking at bettering that agriculture in terms of industrialization and bettering that security in terms of empowering individuals to be aware of these policies or these security policies, I don't think we will be able to make it. Honestly, we
So
are
you're
still
saying
badly
top
off
priority.
as Uganda.
Okay.
Okay.
So you think we don't have our priorities right at the moment?
Certainly, they're actually misplaced, I would say.
That wouldn't be
Okay.
true.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that discussion shortly. So let me move to Derek. So Derek, in terms of economic development, because you see, because most of the planning areas, I know we seek to achieve several things, but I'm picking out issues of economic development. Now, where does Uganda stand within the EAC, or feel free to compare it worldwide, but especially within the EAC in terms of economic development, where do we fall?
I personally, most of the times, I don't like comparing Uganda with other countries.
Yeah.
I hate putting it to the same scale with other countries.
It's a good country.
You know, my friend here was discussing the history of our country. So, like in the ESC, we can't compare ourselves with Kenya. We have different conditions and futures that make us distinct. Uganda, we've had bad history for the past decades. The pre-colonial years didn't do us good. We got some presidents who were, I must use the word illiterate, especially that decade of 1971 to 1980, that regime of Amin. This is a president who woke up in a single day and expelled the entrepreneurial class in the country. At the time, we needed to transition from a subsistent economy to a modern economy. The guy couldn't differentiate between gross national product and gross domestic product. He believed that Uganda should develop from the forces of the natives. But
What's that about?
Yeah, it will be my question later on when Derek finishes.
to be realistic, a country doesn't develop only from the forces of its natives only.
True.
The Indians and the other Asians were championing the entrepreneurship in this country. And what happened after chasing them? Businesses came to a standstill, the economy broke down. That whole decade witnessed an economic breakdown. So when we are comparing Uganda to Kenya, why we were suffering during those days of Amin, Kenya had its entrepreneurial class developing the country. And I think that's where they left us. For them, they continued progressing while we remained behind. So that's the EAC Agenda 2050. I personally don't look at it as realistic because we can't move at the same pace. Kenya's economy is much bigger compared to ours, and when we try to catch up, it may be very costly. I was privileged to attend the Afro-Indian Investment Summit. It happened last year in November. So the Indian community was celebrating 100 years of existence in Uganda. I don't know whether they counted that decade when Amin had expelled them.
So there's a possibility they subtracted.
They should subtract. It was good that on that very day, they managed to mobilize up to almost $200 million for investment into this country. Why? Because of the security that this government has tried to put in place. It has tried to put in place an enabling environment that now investors from all over the world feel confident to come and invest in Uganda. Unlike in the past, they couldn't trust their money with Uganda. But I can confidently state that as where we are now, Uganda will start developing. Unlike in the past when we had issues all over the country with insecurity, you know, security is a prerequisite for development. Nobody can wish to take his money to a country where there is insecurity. Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Derek. So, Derek, given former President Idi Amin's position at that time and his reasons, would you have let the Asians stay?
He had the authority. However much some things were not going well, the natives were being mistreated. But he had the same powers he used to expel the Asians. He would have used the powers to put things right. But he took it, I must say, emotional. What?
Took it personally.
He slept and woke up and...
But he really didn't understand how economics works. So,
Okay. Okay, anyway, that was a by the way question. So let me get to Sam. Let's get into the discussion. So what is your perspective, Sam, on Uganda's priority areas? Do we have our priorities right?
Yeah, before I get there, I think I have heard from him, saying how Amin's decision was not right. But me, of course, all of us, maybe except you, we are debating from the history and the analysis we have. But I hope you also from this regime. So I don't think Amin's reasons were actually bad. They are very valid reasons. Although, of course, there are some mistakes. It was, to some extent, overreaction. But from the history that we have actually run and the economics and how economics plays out, it was actually very necessary to expel them. Although maybe the killings that went on for those who did go and most of the things that happened were not intentional. But his intention was actually to hand over Uganda to the natives. When you actually realize Ugandans were like slaves in their own country, because for you to maybe do business, it was very hard for you because you are competing with someone who is already grounded. You have not gone to school because of the system that screwed you from way too behind, and you're actually competing with someone who actually has resources at disposal. These people are repatriating profits, so they were actually of basically no use because the economy you're planning to build, you're actually draining resources to your homeland. And because there were no sophisticated systems like maybe some of tracing profit repatriation or some aspects of money laundering, I think it was the best available option because we had not yet established too much.
Okay, so Sam, what is then your perspective on President Museveni giving back all the property? So, because when President Museveni came into power, actually there is a law that was set up, property of the Asians that were later on taken over, been given back.
Yeah, that was a good move.
It's like undoing what was done.
No, those things are not the same because by the time actually Uganda was handed over to the owners, we had the emergence of businessmen like the late BMK. Those are people who actually came up and tried to do something for themselves when the Asians had left. So when the Asians actually came back, we had actually moved a step of competing. So it was a good move at the right time, but I think even Amin's move was correct at that time because it was really total slavery. A country that is coming from insecurity and unstable regimes, and then you actually don't have the economic power, then you're actually in a dictatorship, there is no political will. So if you actually oppressed politically, then you're also oppressed economically, then I don't think you're a citizen of this country. So I think Museveni's move was also right at this time, at the correct time, when Ugandans had realized what is at stake and how business is done. Unlike that, those days where Asians used to actually keep information in their own accounting books. I'm an accountant by profession. So they actually used to like hide their accounts and use their language because they were sure no one is going to actually access the profits they have made and stuff. And therefore they actually used to ship this money to their nations. So they used to keep some separate accounts of just maybe fulfilling regulatory reasons and just keep on squandering money like that. Yet it is basically their money, but this thing was meant to build the economy together. They were identifying as citizens in the first place, but that was not the case because if you want to identify as a citizen, then you actually owe a duty to government, like paying taxes. But these people were hiding things and doing things and all sorts of things that we have read about. We were not there, so we're debating from the knowledge and research we have gathered.
Okay, Adungo is smiling. Probably was there at the time.
No,
Yes. So some back before I go to Adungo, back to my question. Your perspective on Uganda's priority areas.
Yeah, I had actually strayed off from my question. Basically, what I was saying is that we actually have the priorities right. For example, the aspect of security, the geopolitics around the world, like the developing countries, you actually have to prioritize security. Why? Because you actually have people who think that you're oppressing them and you have rights here and there. People are creating governments like in Rwenzori. People want to take over because they feel you're not yet grounded. So for any sane government and any person who actually wants to capture the political will and actually wants investment, just like Derek said, that you actually can't invest in an insecure environment. So I think the aspect of security is very important and it should be prioritized. I actually think that it has not been prioritized to the extent it should be. Because when you see the housing conditions of our officers are deplorable, when you see most of the aspects like you have to pay for a police patrol vehicle, they will ask you for fuel. It's not that it is some element of corruption, and these people to some extent are genuine, that you have a police patrol parking, but it cannot be fueled by government because maybe some of the resources have not been have not reached where they are supposed to be. Not that they were stolen, but we are struggling economy. But I think the government has tried to a very big extent in prioritizing right things. And I think even the aspect of agriculture, it is not purely true that agriculture has not been prioritized. You can actually see some of the bodies that have been put, like Operation Wealth Creation. But most of the initiatives were targeting agriculture because they wanted to bring these people into the money economy. But we are still struggling. But I think we have the priorities right on paper, and for a moment, I thought Uganda had actually taken off. So I was believing with my president, but the statistics seem to be lousy, and we are getting there.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Let me move to Adungo. So, Adungo, do we have our priorities right as a country?
Number one, I'll make sure I answer that question. But number two, I think Sam is a supporter of the ruling party, which is actually very okay. He's entitled to his decisions and his choices
That's my
per se.
story.
I would actually very much agree with Sam when he says security is actually important, and it is good that we are prioritizing security. That is very good, actually. But where he fails to understand is that when we are prioritizing security, we are not only looking at the police, we're looking at the army, we're looking at the local defense units, etc., etc. Anything that safeguards the lives of the individuals. It is then very much funny if we are prioritizing a sector such as security, yet the people, they themselves are not feeling very much secure in their own country. We think that then you are not prioritizing it, or even if you are doing it wrongly. And that is where we feel, or I feel, there's a problem in the system. If you are prioritizing security right now, why is it that a policeman is still accepting bribes? You get? Why is it that the LDUs, when they get to the streets in an operation, are mercilessly beating up people? And we have seen the things, not that we are blind to it. Why is it that a policeman, an average policeman, is earning way less money? I mean, you are prioritizing security in the first place, but we are not seeing where that priority or the outcome of it is going. It doesn't make sense. If he claims that we are prioritizing agriculture, why is it that currently we still have very many people in the agriculture sector? Most of them that are dominating are subsistent agriculturalists or peasant farmers who are making their produce to feed their bellies. And even if they are going to sell it, they are selling a kilo of maize at a certain point, it dropped up to 500 shillings. I mean, you are not giving money back to the people. If you are prioritizing things such as Operation Wealth Creation, which is actually a failure of the NRM party, and that is why they have abolished it and they are now on the myogas or whatsoever it is, then it seems you have your priorities set wrongly. I mean, these are things that are supposed to give money in the hands of a peasant person, but at the end of the day, they're actually not getting the money. I think you're not prioritizing the right things then. But there are a lot of things that Sam also went ahead to say. And one of them was about the Indians, which I think Sam is so good at studying the theory, which is actually very okay. But I think that what he forgets is that when the Indians were being chased from Uganda, most of them didn't have where to go. That is number one thing. It shows you that even the profit repatriation he claims that was there cannot be sent to a place where you are no longer calling home. I think that it would be true, but not necessarily true, because most of these people were living in Uganda. They had their homes in Uganda. It simply means everything that they needed for survival was actually in Uganda. That is where they saw their fathers grow. That is where they saw their mothers grow. That is where they have their homes established. And I think maybe that is not a very big concern. But when he talks about these people keeping their accounts, I would very much agree with that. But our priorities, back to your questions, our priorities as Uganda are not set right. You see, if you prioritize any sector and it is the best that you're prioritizing, but at the end of the day, every planning process is never implemented, it simply means the more you keep on injecting, you actually don't get any return from it. That is number one. Number two, it simply means that the people you are planning for, or the people that you are giving power to or strengthening, are actually not receiving the strength at the end of the day. It simply means you as the government has a very wrong perception, or you are very much illiterate about the planning process, the planning procedures, because for a plan to be successful, it has to be implemented. That is number one. It is okay if Uganda prioritizes agriculture. I mean, it is good. It is good to prioritize security because theoretically, people invest in a secure place. But how many local investors in Uganda are investing in Uganda? And that place is secure enough for them to start a business and ensure that it's going to flourish for a period of 1 year before URA comes up and says, oh, you know what, you need to register your business. And man, even the capital is just not enough for you, but they need you to register it. You need to have your TIN. If not, we're going to close you. Very many businesses in Uganda right now don't even reach their first birthday before they have collapsed. And these are the policies that we are trying to say, oh, we are bringing money to the hands of the people. We're just not seeing it. Government, we're not seeing it. Some, we're not seeing it. Okay? But one thing that I think that the government should prioritize is not only agriculture, but the improvement in that agriculture. If you have 100% of agriculture, and you're claiming you're prioritizing that 100% agriculture, yet 75% are peasants, and you are developing and only 10% or 5% are mechanizing that agriculture, man, it is a failure. We are not going to move from that agriculture sector into the industrial revolution to achieve our economic growth from the agriculture sector. It is not going to happen because few people listen, because few people are actually taking up those policies you're bringing for mechanization. So if you want agriculture to flourish, make sure agro-based industries to process what these people are making is actually readily available. Put that one industry to process maize for this local person in, let me say, Western Uganda, and see if they'll not be able to actually produce more maize, take it to the factory, come back to them, mingle it, and then send it out. The other thing that is actually killing Uganda's agriculture is international trade. And I think I'll get to that in a few.
Okay, before I bring back Sam into the discussion, so let me just ask you something else on the issue of agriculture. When you look at the national budget that was read last year, money was actually allocated to agro-industrialization. Could it be the implementation issue, or the money that was allocated to that sector was just little?
The challenge is how practical is that money actually building these agro-based farms? How practical is this money helping these individuals go out there to process their produce? How practical is it? I mean, we are talking about, setting up these agro-based farms, but how many people are actually using it? Are you looking at that? And then the problem is, at the end of the day, that everything that we are producing in its raw form is taken out there. And people are not utilizing the agro-processing farms in the country. Because listen to this. This is how economics actually works for those states that did it. If you are processing your raw products, if you are coming up with your raw products, let me say maize, in the country, and you're taking it out there, first of all, you are selling it out there to be processed. Okay? Then you are buying it again into your country when it is processed. You're making double loss. But if you invest in the agro-processing farms, it simply means you are making it in your country, taking it in your country. It simply means the money you'd need, you're actually giving it to someone in the country. You are developing two things. First of all, this person who is making it, okay, then this person who is processing it. And then giving it back is not even that expensive. You're not incurring any other cost. That's like on a small scale. Now just imagine we did that for all the agricultural products that we have in the country. Cotton, whatsoever it is, whatever you want to call it. It simply means that you are going to improve something. The problem is, even these farms that you're setting up are not there. The money is there, but the farms are not being built. They are not there. We are not seeing them. And that is the challenge. The priorities may be right, but the implementation. So it simply means that so long as we keep on making the same plans, the same processes, we're still going to get the same results, and that is not development.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, let me bring Sam back into the discussion. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. First of all, he has said a lot that I've lost track of some of them. But when he says that, well, agriculture, on the aspect of agriculture, these are the people that are fighting the Vinci coffee deal. For example, Museveni was suggesting how coffee should be processed here and how actually coffee beans should be roasted here and value added and then exported. So I think on his aspect of saying, well, you actually export raw materials and stuff, everything has its budget constraints. Economic transformation doesn't come overnight. You actually have to do most of the things, like, for example, you have to invest in the factories he's talking about. You actually, an average factory can take you a year to set up and even recruit human resource. So those are processes. And those things have actually started coming on. For example, the aspect of the sugar factory in Atiak, most of the factories, even a pharmaceutical factory that is actually inputting agricultural products, most of the things have actually been done. So I don't think his argument that, well, we're actually exporting raw materials purely would hold, because we think for us to get there, then we actually have to do some value addition, which is being done, and the president himself has always advocated for that. Maybe this is some of the supporter of their parliament or their president who actually wants to play blame game everywhere, and just for the sake of maybe just escaping an argument. We also have seen these things are being done. On the aspect of security, an officer earning 400,000 or 500,000 is purely due to budget constraints, because we have seen a budget of security. It is like 4 times better than even the budget of parliament. There was the budget in trillions, parliament is taking somewhere close to 700, and even the judiciary earning
about 3.9 something trillion being given to security.
I think some 4 times, if my math is correct, 4 times better than the other side. But then the officer still earns 400,000. So you would purely see that that is a budget constraint, because we actually have a budget ceiling. It's not that we're in abundance and we have the budget in billions of dollars. No. So I think for the welfare of security, which I actually hinted on, that it can be worked on if we actually give more priority than we are giving now. And he actually basically agrees that
Oh.
we actually have our priorities right. So that would, to some extent, be a
I
concession
think
that
his issue
we're
is on
good.
the issue of implementation part, because something else, before I bring Derek into the discussion, because we have sort of centralized it. Now, when you talk about the issue of value addition, investment into agriculture and into the local industries, into the country. Now, to what extent is that even being done? Because when we look at Uganda's export, recently Kenya rejected our maize and milk. What did we have to show at the Dubai Expo? So, to what extent are we implementing? That was Adungo's issue. To what extent are we implementing our priorities?
We're actually implementing our priorities. One of my submissions in response to him, and maybe basically to you, is that economic transformation takes time. I've showed you that we actually produce a lot of things that we can't add value to all of them at once. For example, the sugarcane we are planting and producing and making sugar here and exporting sugar which is already made. That is a priority gone right, and we have gone to that extent right. We are actually trying to do crisps and exporting. We're trying to do most of the things and exporting. But some of the raw materials cannot be processed now, because you actually have to prioritize investment in factories, you have to prioritize in human resource capital development, you have to train human resource, you actually have to do most of the things. And we think that it is over time. These things are being done. It's not purely that, well, when the president or some members of parliament who actually support him, in his view, sees the things happening, then they take a back seat. No. What he says is that we have entirely ignored the whole aspect of value addition. Am I wrong?
Yes, you are.
You have
Okay.
actually tended to say that we have done nothing about it, and that is purely not true. Transforming from agriculture to the service sector, or even to industrialization, which is like the pattern of development, is going to take some time. And we think that the vision entails everything and the NDPs. And I think by 2040, we shall be there.
I hope when we reach 2040, we don't shift the vision. Okay,
I'll
so
be
let me
protected,
bring Derek in.
I will remind him.
Let me bring Derek into the discussion. So, Derek, what is your perspective on Uganda's priority areas?
Uganda's priority areas, according to the NDP3, are good, I must say, because they looked at the sectors that have got a high multiplier effect. That when you inject this money into the economy, into those sectors, it multiplies fast to bring about development. And these areas are tourism, minerals, oil and gas, human capital development, and agriculture. So, talking of agriculture, it is worthwhile investing in agriculture. Last year, we had issues with famine and hunger in Karamoja. We can't be here praising ourselves. Every time I'm watching TV, people be saying Uganda is a part of Africa. But how can we be a part of Africa when our brothers there are dying of hunger? It's unfair. So we have to invest in this agriculture that we can achieve food security. You know, security is in many perspectives, only that we tend to look at it on the military angle, but food security also is very important. Last year, we had some creeping inflation, and the most part of it was as a result of the rising food prices. We had run short of maize.
I think that was global.
Huh?
It was global.
Yeah, it was global.
But as a country, we also suffered from it.
Yeah,
As
We are
a
not immune to
a country
suffering.
that has agriculture as its backbone, we also suffered. Yes, Derek.
globally, the issues were to do with, I think wheat. It is wheat that was coming from Ukraine and Russia. Also, you would factor in the aspect of the petroleum, how it it trickles up in the prices of commodities, increasing the cost of production. But as a country, we must be producing our food and in adequate quantities, but we are not yet there. And some of the reason as to why we are not achieving modernization of agriculture is to do with socio-cultural changes. Because when you look at Karamoja, these are people who culturally believe that they shouldn't transition to a modern society. They believe that culturally one becomes a man by
owning cows,
by owning cows and doing the rustling. That one becomes a man depending on the number of cattle raids you've engaged in. So, when you still have such issues, it means you have to work hard. Then also, my friend here was discussing on the issue of how we ought to agro-industrialize. It's good. It's good to industrialize, but in some cases we've faced sabotage from the European states. They still got the competitive advantage over us when it comes to international trade. They want to exploit us because they can't imagine a situation where they are industrializing and we are also industrializing. They want us to produce the raw materials and then they
process.
They want to process. I was reading a book by one of the prominent entrepreneurs in this country. It's called Andrew Rugasira. The Good African Story is the proprietor of Good African Coffee, on how it was hard for him to get Ugandan branded coffee on a supermarket shelf in the UK. A lot of sabotage. The standardization, you bring the product.
Those are food safety concerns.
Food safety, and it's sabotage. It's mere sabotage. Getting a product on the markets of the European Union and the US, it is hard. They don't like us to develop, and that is why in the recent days I've lost trust in these publications by the World Bank and the IMF. Those people are interested in keeping us backward. Everything they write about us is to discourage, to do what? Uganda had, the other day, Museveni, our good president, had promised us to deliver us to a middle-income country. Unfortunately, that's when COVID crept in, and the average rate of economic growth had to drop. For those 2 years, we grew around 4.5%. But by 2025, we are expected to recover to 7% of economic growth. And when we get there, we'll be drawing near to middle income status. But that is easy to mention. That is easy to mention when we are discussing development issues of this country, and you don't mention corruption.
Yeah. Because actually, as you bring in corruption, the money for security, that it combined fighting corruption.
The money for security.
Yeah. The money that was allocated
for
security included security, rule of law, and fighting corruption.
Mindset change.
What he calls budget constraint. It's actually corruption.
Yes, we are having Derick. Yes.
That is not true.
Talking of security and its budget, globally, the budgets of security are always classified because we can't expose, the state can't expose its budget since we have enemies, our neighboring countries, you never know, they don't like us. So you can't be pointing that we are going to invest here and there and there. That globally, it is a global problem that security budgets remain classified. However, to some extent in Uganda, I think it is being
Too much
exaggerated. It is being over-exaggerated because you can't be investing in security for 10 consecutive years. Security taking the lump sum of the budget when we don't have an internal aggression looming, then you continue legitimizing it. It means some people are profiting from it.
Derek,
I must
can
say.
interject. We have had insecurity 10 years even back. Northern Uganda had threats. DRC border is on the rise, like ADF. You actually have unstable neighbors. You have South Sudan. You have very crazy neighbors who are in war. So it's security shouldn't be about internal security, but even threats from outside, whether perceived or true, then I think security should be there. So I don't think it's a problem.
I'm saying the most attention would be drawn to internal aggression. Of course, we've had rumors on how the state even creates some insecurity in the neighboring countries. I don't want to delve much into it, but that's how states operate, I must say.
He's protecting you. You might be.
Yes, let's give
But
Derek some audience.
back to your question on the priority areas for development. Talking of tourism, tourism is this sector that can contribute much to GDP. And I must say some countries have already taken that path. The UAE, it shifted from relying on petroleum to tourism. And this is a country which got no forests, no national park, no what, but they are trying to be creative. And now everyone in this country, you hear them going to Dubai. That is money moving out. The strategy on tourism, I would request the government that it should change also to accommodate local tourism. One will tell you that he has toured Dubai, but if you ask him the national parks he has toured in this country, they want to be more than 2. So it means we are taking our money outside. I don't know why Uganda Wildlife Authority and Uganda Tourism Board only emphasizes foreigners to come and visit the country. Yet we also, Ugandans, some of our citizens have got the money to invest around and have good time. But because of the marketing and sensitization, we are not tapping into the potential of our own citizens. But if those areas can be addressed, tourism presents a big potential for this country to develop. Rwanda, the other day I was reading in the papers, one of its national parks got only 5 lions, only 5. And they are even toothless because they buy for them meat. But if you are to look at the tourist arrivals Rwanda gets, we can't compete with them. Why? The marketing. We need to get aggressive with the marketing. That is tourism. Talking of minerals, the mineral sector, personally, I haven't seen it being transparent, especially with gold. I hear there is gold in Karamoja and they are already mining it.
In Mubende also.
In Mubende.
Locals are mining it.
No, the other day locals, artisanal miners in Mubende were stopped from mining the gold.
But
And
the mines are burying people. Which people?
The proceeds from those minerals, I haven't seen them translate into the national budget, into the revenues. I don't know whether some big boys in the government are profiting from it. They need to address it and make it clear. And if there is the gold in Karamoja, the proceeds from it should be used to develop the locals there.
Okay, I'm going to cut you right there, Derek. We are taking a short break and we'll still come back with this discussion. Thank you. See you after the break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that short break. We are still talking about the government of Uganda's priorities and whether we have our priorities right. And I have with me students from different universities. I have with me Sam, Adungo, and Derek. So before we took that short break, we were with Derek. We had the panelists answer a general question on whether we had our priorities right. I'll move to Sam. So Sam, there's something you hinted on. I think we had a bit of a discussion on earlier, issues of exports, Uganda's exports. Now, to what extent has the government created an environment conducive for Uganda enough to be able to export?
Yeah, thank you, Jenna. First of all, we have to appreciate that the government has tried to a very big extent. Because when you realize that exports actually not charged VAT, so that is a credit for government of enhancing people's capacity to export. Because we think tax is actually an impediment, because when you actually realize that when they are clearing imports and exports, you can even appreciate that you might find you're buying a good at maybe 100 shillings and it has a tax of 200. And that's something that is to some extent not fine. But the government has actually sacrificed of scrapping VAT on exports. The government has actually signed different agreements with countries to import its products. And the government has to some extent tried to market. For example, when you see instances of a Dubai Expo where Ugandan products were showcasing, that is an expensive event that anyone in the world was there and the government tried. You can actually realize that the president is in and out of the country trying to lobby investors to actually come here and add value which can be exported to all countries, because Uganda is still struggling in an aspect of human capital development. We don't have expertise in some of the things that can actually earn money. You have seen the president advocating for exporting, I think, fish. I think, what do they call that? Component of fish. And that is something that is going to yield more money. So we think that the president has actually focused on export promotion, and some of the strategies have been implemented, and we can actually appreciate that. Although one of the challenges we are facing is that to some extent we lack some of the standards. For example, for you to meet food safety standards in the European Union and in the US, it actually takes you more to produce here. So you find that you're actually producing something at a relatively higher price, which you're going to export if it is a finished product. And that has to some extent discouraged some of the people from processing finished products. For example, coffee. When you actually export raw coffee, the coffee beans, which are not roasted, you actually incur less costs. But in a case where you actually decide to roast your coffee and export finished coffee, which is in a finished form, there are high import tariffs the other side in the US and European Union. When you actually reach there, they have to do food safety standards, which you might not meet because you actually don't have the necessary technology and sometimes the expertise of running most of the machines that would warranty you to export. So we can actually appreciate that the government has tried in the small and meager resources we have for that sector to actually promote export. And we think that this is going to traject as time goes by.
Okay, before I push to Adungo, also additionally, the government has been accused by activists on not negotiating well for Uganda, especially in terms of, for example, agreements, double taxation agreements, where you find that Uganda ends up getting very, very little taxes from some of these countries. So what is your perspective on that?
I think the DTS, double tax agreements,
Yeah.
they have actually been implemented in most of the countries like Mauritania and most of the neighboring countries. And basically, that is actually done to improve the aspect of trade, because when you actually have for example, a foreign tax which is paid the other side, being an allowable deduction this side, that is a credit of enhancing exportation. Because in an aspect where you actually believe that you're going to do some global business, that is a credit. And maybe for lack of a better explanation, the activists are not well-wishers of this country.
No, but Sam,
because
at 10%, we negotiate as low as 10% when Ugandans are paying. I mean, other countries are paying way, way more than that. But in DTS, you find our percentage is as low as 10%.
No, you see the position we are in also, Alan, say, because for example, if you're poor and you're desperate for business, you don't negotiate like someone who is rich and is relaxed. Whether business goes on or whether it doesn't go on, it's a nothing for them. It's nothing. They have alternatives that they can meet some standards of exporting outside countries. So us actually having such rates, which are necessarily high, it's not like it is intentional. It's a tight position. When you actually try to negotiate and things fail, then you actually have to settle for less and improve on yourself to actually enhance a bargaining power. Because right now, we're actually constrained in most aspects. We are constrained. So Uganda actually getting high tax rates and correcting low tax the other side is not intentional to oppress its own citizens. No, we need that tax, but we actually have to we have to weigh which option is better, because you might actually get that tax the other side, but then you actually end up losing most aspects of business because the other people are not even willing to trade with your country. So I think the well-wishers, for lack of a better word, they don't wish this country well.
Okay, let me move to Adungo. We are still talking about the aspects of international trade, exports, and so forth. As we know, EAC is now a block, and it's a customs block.
Yeah.
And we have tried as much as possible as a block to negotiate EAC. We have been trying to clear tariffs between us and, charge import duty as a block. Now, my question is outside the EAC actually. It's on Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which now Africa is pushing for. How prepared do you think Uganda is to trade with other countries, 54 states?
Okay, so before I tackle that particular question, allow me appreciate Sam for what he has said. No?
Yeah,
I
please
think
do.
he has exhibited some knowledge about our exportation as Uganda. But one thing we have to realize is that number one, Ugandan's export is bringing way too little income for the country. It simply means our BOP position, balance of payment, is not favorable at all. It means that we spend a lot on importation of things than what we get on exportation. Why? Number one is because we're basically exporting raw materials. Number two, we have a lot of competition. I mean, it's the same coffee that we're exporting as Uganda. It's also the same coffee that Kenya is exporting. And you'll see how that trend will also affect the African free trade at the end of the day, because it is still going to be the same coffee that maybe South Africa is going to export. It's going to be the same sugarcane that is going to come from Natal in South Africa. It's still going to be the same thing. So you realize that there's a lot of competition. And first of all, you have realized that there's no way, even if EAC is favorable now for the East African states, there is no way that Kenya and Uganda sit on a round table and say, you know what, let us collectively bargain for the coffee that we are sending out there. That at a point that if they give us a low price, then we refuse to export it and we leave it just that, or we get other alternatives. What is going to happen is that if Uganda says, you know, this amount of money is little, Kenya is just going to say, you know what, we can give you this one. And I think that is the biggest issue. Even when we talk about the fish that we're exporting, I mean, globally, these people, for a lack of a better word, don't even need our fish at the end of the day. I mean, they have very many alternatives that they're in favorable conditions with, which will still bring me to the point that Derek talked about, that they don't wish us well, for a lack of a better word. I don't want to go into diplomatic words, or, you know, no. For a lack of a better word, they don't wish us well. And that is a very big problem. The main thing that is bringing money for Uganda right now, in terms of exports, I would say is, first of all, tourism, which export is technical because the more people come in, that is exportation of tourism. I think it's the only sector that has its exportation the other way around. But the other one is electricity. It is so funny that we are actually making crazy money from exporting electricity to our neighbors. But I mean, we are not getting that electricity here. So funny and very weird.
We can't afford it.
Okay, he's saying we can't afford it. Actually, that is what he keeps claiming. That is what he keeps claiming. They cannot afford it, and that is a very, very good argument. Simply because how can we then claim that we are developing, which is GDP, economic growth,
when we
yet
cannot afford
our people
electricity?
cannot afford electricity? I mean, it shows you that there's a very big disparity between economic welfare of the people and the economic growth. It simply means that the people cannot cope up with the economic growth that is in the country, and that is not economic growth. That is not economic growth. It simply means you are improving, listen, you are improving the structures at which people are living in, but the people cannot live in that house. It's like building a very good house, but the people inside the house are living without food. And that doesn't make sense at the end of the day. But maybe that will come in the later when I'm talking about my personal what I think is right and how maybe these policies are helping give people money. I think that will come in later on. But when we talk about this free trade around Africa, we are not ready for it. That is the plain truth. Even if we are mentally prepared for it, even if we can actually do it, the issue is we just have almost the same things that we are going to trade. I mean, you cannot go and start giving South Africa sugar. They have it. You cannot go to Kenya and start giving them milk, reasons as to why they even rejected our milk. They have it. You cannot go to Tanzania and start giving them maize. I mean, they have it. And that is why our maize price was lowered. You cannot go to Ghana and start giving it cocoa. I mean, they're the best at doing it. So it simply means that in order for, and this is basic for anyone who went to any economic class or even commerce, that in order for international trade to happen, it is more of like improved barter trade, okay? We're basically giving you what you do not have, and you're giving us money, okay? At a point that almost every African state is agro-based. I mean, even the maize you're planting here is the same maize they're going to plant in Ethiopia. It is the same maize they're going to plant in Democratic Republic of Congo. It's the same maize they're going to plant in South Africa. And no one is willing to buy that maize of yours, even if you process it to the dot. Are you looking at that? So it puts us in a very dire situation. But we also appreciate the differences that are in Africa. And I think that is where we can actually be able to develop as African states. That Uganda doesn't have cocoa, right? But the problem is, your Ugandans, how many Ugandans go to Cafe Javas and order for, a drink with cocoa in it, with that kind of beverage. It simply shows you that you need to, first of all, improve the welfare of these individuals, put them in a better position to actually demand for these various goods, okay? And when you do that, you're actually making it better for everyone to trade freely, because you know, I'm going to send my sugar in DRC, and the people in DRC actually have the capacity to buy that sugar because they don't have it. Are you looking at that? And that is how we are able to develop this whole African trade. But for now, with the nature of our people, the way we are operating, what he calls a budget constraint is actually corruption. The way we are operating, I don't think we are ready for it. I don't think we're ready. It's going to be good on paper. The concepts are going to be written very well, but at the end of the day, it won't benefit us.
Okay, thank you so much, Adungo. Let me get to Derick. So, Derick, let's forget international trade export and come back here. Now, in the area of planning and having in the spirit of having operatives, right, to what extent are Ugandans consulted when it comes to planning for this country?
I have some issue to make to do with international trade.
Yes, please do.
Talking of Uganda exporting commodities like coffee, I believe as a country we need to first work on driving local demand. I'm from a coffee growing district, but most of the farmers don't even know what products come out of coffee. They just produce and sell it.
They just produce.
Honestly, they don't know. They just produce, sell.
Yeah.
I must say most Ugandans don't drink coffee.
They can't afford it.
Not that they can't afford it, but like in my home district, people take tea and they take this regular tea.
Mukwano.
How they do it,
Renzone.
they just pour in hot water to see the color of the water change. That's all. That's all they know. And that's why I want to request Uganda Coffee Development Authority. They should first work on driving the local demand. However much these cash crops, like they were named by the colonials, that they are cash crops. I don't know whether when you sell maize, it doesn't give you cash, but they had told us that it's only cotton, coffee, tea, that they are the cash crops.
Vanilla and the others.
So coffee should first get local demand. We can't be relying on the market from outside countries when we can't have some contribution to the market of the products we are producing. Then discussing the
aspect of consultation.
Most people are not consulted in this country. The MDAs, planning machineries, sit in their offices and come up with these plans. I must say they come up with plans which are in their interest. That's why I had mentioned the issue of corruption. They always target where they can swindle some money. These plans, most of the times, are not in the interests of the common citizen. Now, when you look at the 7 pillars of the parish development model, personally, it's only that section of the revolving fund that is going to benefit the ordinary Ugandan. The rest of the story appears to be more of paperwork. It is not materializing. Is it pillar number 7? They talk of mindset change and what? But it wasn't done.
Isn't mindset change like number 1?
No, number 1 is production and what? And me, I would believe the 7 pillars would have been planned in a systematic way, that one would contribute to another, to another, to another. But
They are like independent.
yeah, they stand on their own. Now you talk of mindset change. It is number 7.
The last thing.
It's the last thing. But people haven't been consulted. They haven't been sensitized.
They will change their minds.
They talk of building parish information, what systems. Some parishes in this country have no access to national grid. There is no electricity.
No internet, no radio.
But then you talk of what? Of building parish information systems.
We shall get
So
there. That's a good
such a policies remain on paper. Planning needs to be shifted from the MDA's boardrooms to the villages. The people at the village level should be consulted on issues they think and believe that can work for them. You can't be in your air-conditioned office in Kampala and you're planning for that herdsman in Karamoja. He will automatically not buy into your ideas. You need to first come on ground, assess what do the people want, what do they believe in, what are their cultural values, and see how things can tally up.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let me move to Sam. So Sam, earlier, I know you said the government actually has our priorities, right? So are there some of the areas that you think should also be prioritized as a country?
Yeah, basically, if I was running my own government, then education, that's treasonous. Okay, when I run my own government in the future, not now, something to do about education. We're not yet there. Because, first of all, you find a person gets out of university, just like I am now. I just got out last week, so I'm still a bad student, haven't checked my documents. Yeah, so you get out of campus, you get out there, and when you sit on your bed, you actually can't crack an idea or some kind of innovation. Not that you're dense or you're bad, but the education system you went through, someone will just come and tell you how there's taxation, you appreciate that. But then you have never interacted with something to do with taxation. You actually hear about it, you even do computations, you're good at it, but basically you're going to spend 2 or more years without actually even practicing it. Not that you actually don't have an avenue, but you're actually equally bad, and an employer would see you as a liability. So why would he take in someone who is not going to add value? Because you, first of all, you take in someone, you have to train, you have to pay, you have to do other things. And this person actually, most of the adverts now, they're like, if you have 2 years experience, but then you're just a graduate, you just got out. They are minimal entry-level jobs. So these people, the education system is to some extent something that was crafted maybe in colonial time, where you're taught this happens, but you don't know how to do it, but you actually know this happens. And someone who does it for you is coming from outside. For example, you would see you are a IT team. Most of them are Indians. They actually have to do web support from India. These are things that Ugandans would be doing. But then Ugandans were taught there is web support, but they were not taught on how to do that. So I think education would be my second priority after security.
Okay, yes, let's move to Adungo. So in your own perspective, what do you think should be priority areas for Uganda?
Okay, I won't say A, B, or C, but I just want to give you something very brief. And just for the record, I want everyone to pay attention, especially Sam.
You have Sam's full attention.
Yes. You see, there are 3 basic concepts that we need to understand, especially when we're talking about development or economics at the end of the day. One of them is resources. Second is how they are allocated, and thirdly is how they are used. The resources being there, how they are allocated, and how they are used. How an economy works is that there needs to be scarcity. Okay? And with that argument, philosophically, we can try to support why people actually embezzle money. They need to have some people without the money, but having just a little bit to keep on putting it somewhere so that they can benefit. Like, that is how the economy works. There are those who have the money, those who don't have the money, then those who are in the middle there. And that is how an economy works. But understand that economic growth looks at basically increasing the GDP. That is the products in a country. Not necessarily the ability of people having to buy that product or not buying it. When he was talking about no local markets in Uganda, and someone was like, they just can't afford it. Yes, we can't afford it. Why? Because we don't have the money to afford it. But coffee is growing every day, but people don't have the ability to afford it. People are poor. Now, it is very funny that it is only in Uganda and some other small states that as economic growth is increasing, the poverty rates are also increasing or remaining constant. That doesn't happen in any economy that is growing. Never. As economic growth is increasing, poverty is reducing, because that economic growth is accompanied with the welfare of the people, the standards of living of the people. Okay? And that is where maybe we would support the parish development model. But as I said in the beginning, the implementation is the problem. We have the resources, yes. We have allocated them, yes. But are we using them? No. And then the other thing, and I would very much support someone who talks about education. Okay? That is the first thing that I would actually also, I would prioritize education first. The reason as to why the Asian tigers were able to develop is because they improved their education. Now, there's a problem with almost everyone thinking that education is you going to class and sitting and going through, for goodness sake, 3 years nursery, 7 years primary, and then 6 years secondary, then campus 3 years, then after campus, you have to go on-job training again, no payment. I mean, like, by the time you're done, you're like, okay, why did I waste all my time? And there's someone somewhere there who is just doing on-job thing from the very start. Education, and I want to make this very clear for our viewers. Education is introduction to reality. Let us stop with the theory. If that theory is not part of my reality, I don't need it. Okay? If someone has the passion for agriculture, don't take them to a school and show them the types of soil. Take them to the garden. Let them dig. Let them dig out the soil type, and they will know. Every time they see that soil type, brownish in color, that is good for planting maize. Not going to class and you say, oh, these are lateral soils that are good for planting maize. That is not education. And the reason as to why the Asian tigers, these other states, were able to develop is because their education was accompanied with innovation and creativity. That on top of what is there, how can we better it? And states like Uganda don't appreciate destructive creativity or destructive innovation. And I'll give an example of that. Maybe we are suddenly doing it. Safi. Nowadays, people don't drink Safi, right? People know Honor, Splash, even Splash is phasing out. That is destructive creativity. And on top of you having your juice in something small, they make it better, but doing away with the what? With the previous one. If we have education, innovation is assured. When innovation is assured, investment starts from the local individuals. You don't need to tell them, you know what, there's market for coffee. They will automatically know that coffee is far much better to make me active than the tea I am drinking. It means you are killing very many birds with one stone, but it starts with you letting them know. Okay, and that is very much important. I think personally, I would prioritize education, but not this education of yours where you are rebranding the new curriculum. Now you want more 5 years for people to do retakes in A level. I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much, Adungo. Let me move to Derick. We are moving to the end of our discussion. So in your own perspective, what do you think you would include as priority areas for Uganda given the authority?
In the first place, discussing of education, As a country, I believe where we go wrong is going to university, studying and getting that degree in expectation of getting a job.
Afterwards.
We get it wrong. One should identify a problem in society that needs to be solved. Then he or she can focus in that direction. And I must say, me, I won't send my children even to secondary school.
Please do.
They will do the basic primary school. Next is technical or vocational school, that they can study and get these hands-on skills that are required in today's job market. I was reading in the papers, the supervisor engineer of the new Nile Bridge, he never went to campus. After primary school, he went to a technical school. He kept on piling the certificates, and now he's a doctor in engineering and one of the best in this country, but he never stepped in secondary school. So the issue of going to secondary school, then university, we miss the road. We miss the road to prosperity. Because me personally, I remember when we were in secondary school, we would be like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. That is primary school. After getting to secondary, then mathematics, biology, and chemistry, they become tough.
Maybe I'll be an accountant.
You give up on the dream. Then you settle for these arts courses. Like enough, one is given a government scholarship, you go to university and
So, Derek, as we summarize, you have run out of time.
You're doing Bachelor of Social Science, Bachelor of Library and Information Science. But what are you going to solve? What contribution are you going to make to society? Because in economics, demand is matched by supply. And that is it brings me to the other discussion of the pay rise of the science teachers and the arts teachers. So if there is demand for the science teachers, it means they are entitled to the pay rise. The arts teachers are many in supply. It means the others who
I know Adungo wouldn't agree.
I personally had an issue with it. At the time when the salary increment for science teachers came out, I was in the middle of arts teachers. I just made one statement. I said, I don't have the emotions to be an arts teacher at this time. I don't have the emotions to share the same staff room with science teachers. Anyway, let's let Derek finish. We have run out of time.
Like he had mentioned that we now need innovation and creativity. And this is the thing that will be driven by the scientists, the science teachers. That is why they had to increase their pay, to bring them on board and get them motivated that they can drive this country to where it ought to get.
Okay, so we have actually run out of time. We have come to the end of our discussion. I'll give each of you less than 60 seconds to give us your closing remarks. I'll start with Sam.
Yeah, it has been good getting back here because the discussion was really so insightful. But I would respond to Derek basically. The coffee is actually can't be afforded in Uganda because I got the privilege of getting employed in a coffee factory as an accountant. But when you see the processes, when we are doing costing, the costs we incur, it would be so high to actually impose it on a Ugandan because 500 grams of coffee would go for 60,000.
But Sam, how much is Nescafe when they import it back into the country?
Nescafe is the BHP. It is actually the last product. We get screen 18, we get 17, we get 15, we get most products. And this Nescafe you see is the last grade of coffee, the broken coffee, the black beans, and most of the spoiled coffee is the Nescafe. So that is just like a byproduct. It's not like you're taking coffee. Standard coffee would cost you 60,000. You have gone to these cafes and you're complaining of cappuccino, which has been mixed with some milk, and they're saying that is 20,000. And for
Just
you,
a
you
cup.
say they are cheating. No, coffee is expensive. And we think that when you get into middle income, I guess we shall sell the coffee here.
And Ugandans will afford.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let me move to Adungo.
So Sam spends his time talking about coffee. Anyway,
Yeah.
my parting message is very simple. Number one, if you want to achieve, you should actually be focused on what you want. Simple. You want to achieve it, you have to be focused on what you want. And the best way we can do that is by thinking without the box. You have the education. For those that have studied, you have that knowledge. Even if it is theoretical, you have it. Put it into paper. Those that have not gone to school, develop that one thing you're good at. Put it into paper. Because if you already know the path to development and your government is not willing to invest in it, then you have to take an extra effort to do it yourself. So if we are able to do that, then we are going to be achievers, even when our country doesn't recognize it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Derek.
As we conclude, there are some issues that are sabotaging Uganda's development. According to me, one of them is this issue of population growth. Ugandans are producing a lot of children. You know why I'm mentioning it? And I measure it against our land tenure systems. That I inherited land from my father, who also inherited it from the father. But every time we are passing over the land, it is just decreasing.
If you're from Chigezi region.
You understand what I'm talking about. Then also the issue of land tenure system. I've been observing, especially here in Buganda. The other day I was challenged to mention a native Muganda who owns a square mile farm of coffee. They are not more than 5. Why? Land is owned by absentee landlords. And when they are absentee, there are restrictions on the productive activities you are allowed to conduct.
It's their land.
It is their land. Also, they can't come and do what? Carry out productive activities on the land. Tenants will also make noise when they are evicted on the land. So the issue of land tenure, government needs to look into it and address it. Then lastly, I must say economic growth at an individual level is a product of private enterprise and hard work. Ugandans out there need to look out wide and engage in productive activities, work hard. We are in an enterprise economy. You must strive on your own and get out of poverty. I thank our viewers.
Okay. Thank you so much, Derek, for that. I would like to say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, Sam, Adungo, and Derek, for
hosting us.
Thank you. So you're welcome. So thank you so much to Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for putting together inter-university debate, which allows our students to put their views out there and debate some of these issues, which are very, very important. Thank you to our viewers for watching. Feel free to project the discussion further by giving us your own opinion, your own perspective on some of these issues, because these are topics that we live with, issues that we live with in the community. And I'd like to also say thank you for watching. See you again next week, same time.